right, let's get into this discussion now. The Department of Agriculture presented their findings in the land restitution study yesterday. The study, which commenced in 2018, was undertaken to evaluate the impact of the land restitution program on the socio-economic and psychological outcomes of its beneficiaries. According to the Department of Agriculture, the study revealed underlying factors that highlighted deep-rooted trauma of land dispossession and subsequent erratic behaviour. Let's unpack the study further, and for that we're joined by Chief Land Claims Commissioner Nomfundo Ntloko, and of course we are also joined by lead principal investigator of the study from UCT's School of Economics, Professor Keswell. Thank you so much for joining us, to the both of you, and I think Ms. Nomfundo Ntloko, I'd like to start with you. Why it was important for you to go about conducting this research?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good morning. I think for us it was very important to have this evaluation done because restitution as a mandate is quite an important aspect of government, and we wanted to understand the impact of the work that we do for the actual beneficiaries that were dispossessed then. So it also helps us guide policy going forward and for us to be able to close the gaps where there are gaps. So one of the very important studies that we had to do.
Yeah, but I find it interesting that you've looked at also the psychological impact of land restitution processes. I mean, Prof. Keswell, maybe take us through exactly how you conducted the study, what questions you were asking, and you're more than welcome to go ahead and give us some of the key findings then.
Yes, thank you very much for having us on the program. As Chief Commissioner Nomfundo has just mentioned, the study's been a long time in the making, involving many role players, international donors, a government-wide steering committee that essentially provided governance to the study over the period that it ran for, as well as both funders on this committee. While there have been a number of restitution and reparations programs in the post-World War II period, South Africa's restitution program is probably one of the more ambitious ones. And most of those programs internationally have not gone through a formal evaluation of the kind that we've done on this program. So our focus here was not on the operational side of what the Commission does, but rather on, for those who received restitution awards, what sorts of impacts can we detect in terms of how their lives might have changed, or not changed, for that matter. And so when we started our work, which was in 2017, it was important to try and understand essentially where the potential impact domains might lie. And for that we had to look back to earlier work that was conducted that documented the negative effects of forced removals. And so part of the rights-based motivation enshrined in the Constitution for restitution is this idea of equitable redress, and in particular the notion of restorative justice. So what we try to do in the study is give expression to the idea of restorative justice, and one area in which we would be remiss not to investigate here would be on the psychological well-being of beneficiaries, since that is an area that probably was the most affected as a result of forced removals and displacement. So that's the motivation in terms of why we looked at psychological well-being. Okay. But we also looked at economic well-being, and we also looked at cognitive functioning. And then just to very briefly describe what we found, firstly, we collected primary data from 505 claims covering about 3,300 people. Between 2018 and 2019 was the first round of data collection, and then again in 2022, 2023. And so what we found is there's three major findings. One is concerning the economic well-being. So the so-called treatment group in the sample constituted of all beneficiaries that had received some sort of restitution award, covered the period 2013 to 2022. So over this 10-year period, we had quite a wide variation in terms of the types of claims that came before the Commission and the amounts of restitution awards paid in each case.
If you'll allow me, Prof, and I apologize for this, but because of, as you can imagine, the nature of the mornings, we do need to move a little bit quickly. And so I really wanted to get to some of the key findings that we've got here, because one of the things I see is, in terms of economic well-being, the economic power of restitution beneficiaries increased by 16%. I mean, that's interesting numbers. So give us some of that quick data, if you will, please, Prof.
Yes, absolutely. So 16% is probably on the lower level. That finding is not statistically significant. What we found that is quite convincing are the impacts for very large transfers. And in particular, the way the Commission goes about settling claims where it's very difficult or prohibitively costly to do historical valuations of the land that was lost. There's the so-called standard settlement amount, which is roughly 200,000. And for that amount, we find very, very strong and statistically significant effects of 36% increase in per capita monthly consumption. And these are long-term effects because, as I said, the data consists of finalized claims covering the last 10 years. And then for mental health, we find a reduction in the risk of depression for those who would receive their restitution awards as compared to those still awaiting the transfer of these awards. So quite a striking finding in those two domains. And then finally, the other big component of what we looked at is cognitive functioning. There the results are more mixed, but we still have to do more work to try and figure out, because of the nature of that kind of data, whether we actually need a bigger sample to be able to detect the sorts of effects that we find. The effect is positive, though. We see that there are improvements in cognitive functioning. They're just not statistically significant as the other two findings are.
Yeah, I mean, and I wanted to go through the numbers so that I could ask for other numbers as well that may not necessarily have to do so much with the psychological impact of the processes of land restitution. But again, and I'll quote from the evaluation, regarding psychological well-being, the settlement of restitution claims significantly reduces the risk of depression by 0.15 standard deviation score. This implies that the level of trauma diminishes by 15% rate once the restitution claim is settled. Now, and I think that those are encouraging numbers to hear, Ms. Ntloko, but I come to you and I say, why should South Africans care so much about these numbers when we should really be looking at just how far we've come in really meeting the gains that we and goals that we've set as ourselves for land restitution, right? So where are we now, for instance, in the hectares of land that South Africa has expropriated? Where are we now, and how many of those have been leased out to land users? How many of those have translated in transfers to beneficiaries? Let's talk about that data, if you will, just so that we have an update on the progress that we've made there.
I think the important part to remember is that in terms of the Restitution of Land Rights Act, we receive claims that have been lodged, and that's what we focus on. And of the claims that we've lodged, we have completed over 94% of the old order claims, and where we've got households that have benefited over 460,000, and the hectares that we have allocated back to these communities are over 3.8 million hectares. Land costs spent over from the beginning of the work of the Commission to December 2023, we spent 25.8 billion for land acquisition and 23 billion for financial compensation, and over 4.5 billion for development grants that were awarded to these different beneficiaries, and then overall about 55 billion.
Okay.
So the work continues.
All right. Tomorrow we're expecting the budget speech to be delivered, and last year your department received 12.5 billion rand for the land restitution program. What is the budget that you're hoping for in 2024?
Correction, actually, the 12 billion is for overall the work of the department. Our allocation there was about 3.4 billion. So we continue to hope that we get additional resources over time, because as you can imagine, our work is quite complex, and We deal with various forms of land, from high economic to tourism and anything else in between.
Yeah.
So we always look for more funding to be able to allow us to expedite the settlement of claims.
And how are we faring in ensuring that where we do put land back in the hands of the previously disadvantaged, if you will, that this land actually becomes productive? I mean, there was a piece by Johan Kirsten, who's with the Bureau for Economic Research at Stellenbosch University, who says half of the current beneficiaries, I think that's of the agricultural land holding account trading entity, half of that land given over simply has not been productive, has not actually shown any agricultural gains. Where are we in ensuring that we actually use and plow that land?
I think that's one of the findings that's come out as well in the study, that's something that we could upscale in terms of what we refer to as post-settlement. And it's important to note that that is an initiative of both government and private sector to coordinate what happens to the land that we give to the beneficiaries as part of post-settlement. But in terms of the Act, we've got grants that we contribute towards establishment of whatever initiative that the communities seek to build on. But it's a process, and we continue to build on what we already have. As I mentioned, we've already spent about 4.5 billion as grants allocated to these beneficiaries.
Yeah, how do you deal with the view that is held by so many in South Africa, and I stay with you, of course, Ms. Ntloko, that the land restitution program for a greater deal of time has benefited what some call state-aligned traditional leaders and not trickled down to the most vulnerable communities? What do you say to that view?
I would definitely say that's an incorrect view, because if you understand the restitution process, it's guided by the Act, and it specifically states that it is only individuals, communities, or people who actually were dispossessed who get to benefit from this program, as opposed to a land redistribution or reform process, which is outside of the process that we're dealing with. So we deal with specific legislated process where a claim form is submitted by the people who are dispossessed. And then we conduct research, and we have to restore the land to the actual individual communities who are dispossessed. So we cannot then give the land to other participants.
Okay.
And where there's a claimant who feels that we did not follow process, there is an opportunity for them to approach the land claims court for the court to adjudicate on exactly who is entitled to that award.
All right, Prof. Keswell, I'm going to let you step in here. I mean, Ms. Ntloko, they're talking about lessons that you've learned post beneficiaries receiving land or post the process of restitution. I mean, key lessons that you've learned there about sustaining that progress from a psychological point of view and otherwise. I think your mic is off.
My mistake. Yes, this is the first time we've actually done a comprehensive evaluation that, of a large number of claims involving a large number of people. And so, if I don't get a chance to say this later, we're going to be presenting a conference in April where we're going to try and bring together as many stakeholders as possible from the academic sector, people who have been studying restitution for a while, alongside policymakers, and this will take place at UCT in mid-April. The dates are yet to be confirmed. And that will be our opportunity really to kind of put our collective minds together to try and unpack what all of this means and how we take this forward. But this is a study of beneficiaries, that have been recipients of, in some cases, very large awards over the last 10 years. And so if we're detecting that there have been improvements in their overall household welfare through consumption, for instance, and these numbers cover a 10-year period, what that suggests is that these impacts are actually long-run impacts. Yeah. How they result and the particular mechanisms, that's a bit of a black box at this stage. Obviously, having a big injection of money must mean something in terms of the household's ability to save, to invest, to undertake new ventures and opportunities, to invest in the education of the extended family members, the children, the grandchildren, and so forth.
Yeah.
So these are all the different dimensions of the story that we would be needing to unpack, and this conference in April is going to try and position this study both in terms of what is known in the South African literature, but also how it connects to the global discourses
and what
on
we can learn
questions.
And what we can learn from the international community, absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much to both our guests. We really do appreciate it. Thank you so much to Professor Malcolm Keswell, who's the lead principal investigator in that study. He's also with the UCT School of Economics, as well as Chief Land Claims Commissioner, Ms. Nomfundo Ntloko, speaking to us there.